Years of this car sitting all comes to an end today because we are gonna dyno our TT and see how much power it makes.
Yo, Charles, they never saw the engine go in.
Oh yeah, you never saw the engine go in. Watch that now.
In episode 1 of this $1,300 Audi TT series, we brought the car back to the shop, sorted through all the parts, and rebuilt the engine, running into a few hiccups along the way. And big thanks to Advance Auto for partnering with us on this entire crazy Audi TT series. We ended episode 1 with installing the rear main seal, which means our next step is going to be installing the clutch, pressure plate, and flywheel. This is one of those parts that did not come with the car. This clutch should be a really good compromise between holding the horsepower and giving us good drivability.
This is a stage 3 clutch with a light flywheel. The flywheel weighs about 19 pounds. Go ahead and get that on. Go ahead and get all of our flywheel bolts started. We'll get this torqued down. Also, flywheel bolts, as you may guess, are one-time use and they come pre-micro encapsulated, which just means it has thread locker on it. So we're gonna torque this in 3 stages. We're gonna go 30, then we're gonna go up to 60 Newton meters. Now we have to do an additional 90. Going back and checking the torque is easy. Seeing if you did it a quarter turn is not easy. Now, unfortunately, despite me setting everything up properly so that I wouldn't forget, I forgot to put the cover on. So this is a shield that actually is supposed to go behind the flywheel. Supposed to go here. I looked at it and I was like, I need to put this on. Then I put the rear main on. I was like, I need to put this on. Well, crisis and conundrum averted. I actually had another set of flywheel bolts. I think if I were to use this shield, I would probably cut it right about here. There's a bolt that goes here and a bolt that goes here, and that would hold this in place. For our case, I'm gonna take the flywheel back off and do it again. You better believe that I'm grumping myself this whole damn time. Now the internet will know I did it the right way. Now that that unpleasantness is behind us, let's go ahead and clean our flywheel. It's important to pay attention to which way the friction disc goes for our clutch. In our case, this hub piece right here where the springs are goes towards the engine. We'll get our alignment tool to hold it in place. Just like we did to our flywheel, we're gonna clean our pressure plate. So that aligns just like that. Think of tightening flywheel bolts like torquing a wheel down. You wanna go in that star pattern, and these you wanna tighten down a little bit of it at a time. So you're kind of walking the pressure plate on. Then we're gonna torque these babies to 20 Newton meters. I'm gonna start by torquing everybody to 10. Then we'll go back around and do our 20.
Moving up to the top side, we're going to install our studs for our valve cover. I'm not sure why the machine shop took them out, but they did, so we need to put them back on. Something you want to pay attention to if you're doing these, there are different length studs for this 1.8 turbo, so you need to make sure you're putting them back where they came from. Once the studs are on, we can go ahead and put our spark plug well gasket in, put a little bit of sealant in the corners where our valve cover gasket is going to go. We also have our little half moon guy here that lives at the back of the exhaust cam. We need to put a bit of sealant on there as well. Install our valve cover gasket. I'm going to add a little bit of Liqui-Moly engine assembly paste to our cam lobes to be sure they're properly lubricated when we first start our car. Then I'm going to install the covers that live over the intake cam. This is an important step. I've definitely seen those left out before. I'm also going to put a small dot of RTV on the top side of the valve cover gasket right at the front side of the engine. And after all that, we can go ahead and install our valve cover and get it tightened down.
Eurowise stand thing is coming in handy. I am a little unsure about rotating this around. Let's see what happens. Oh, sketchy. Oh, sketchy. Oh, geez. Oh, geez. Where's our next hole? I'm bending the shield. Okay. Okay, I think we're just gonna go this far. I'm worried if I go any further, it's gonna floink around on me. Now we're good.
Next, we can install our new oil pickup tube into our new oil pump. These oil pickup tubes getting clogged might be the #1 reason for catastrophic engine failure on this 1.8 turbo. It gets clogged up, and then your engine gets no oil, resulting in a very sad day for you and your engine. Next, we can drop a bead of sealant on the oil pan and install it. These sealants generally have like a 4-hour wait time before you actually start the car. I think we're probably gonna end up being being okay, with no worry of being done in the next 4 hours. Now we can install our oil filter housing. In all of our parts, there was actually a new gasket for this housing, and I spent a bunch of time cleaning it to make sure we didn't have any leftover crusty oil or anything in the original housing. I didn't find an oil cooler, so likely gonna have to add that to the buy list. Next, we're gonna install a new thermostat seal, and new thermostat housing. And of course, for the thermostat housing, as well as a few other coolant pipes, I decided to upgrade to the metal ones. Here is the part that you have all been waiting for. It's time to break into this turbo kit. What you see before you are the main components of what came with this CTS kit that the previous owner bought. We have some exhaust studs, we have some nuts, we have some bolts, we have the exhaust manifold. Hopefully, this is gonna be everything that we need for this turbo upgrade. To install these studs in the exhaust manifold, I'm gonna use the 2-nut method to put them in. This is where our turbocharger is going to mount. Also, the kit did not come with a gasket for this location, which I actually think is really common. They're supposed to be machine finished, but I went ahead and ordered a gasket anyway. Now, it could be absolutely fine without one, but boy oh boy, would I rather have a gasket installed now and not need it than need one after I get it all put back together.
Now, what I thought would be fun was to test fit the original turbocharger onto the engine to show you what it looks like. So turbocharger, downpipe comes out here.
Now that's enough of that one. Let's get it out of here so we can get our new stuff put on.
Go ahead and put our gasket on so I don't forget that. Here's our manifold. And you're probably also wanting like, Charles, why didn't you refinish that manifold? It would have looked so good. I will be honest, I didn't feel like doing it. I'm already annoyed with how much we're missing and how much money I've spent on this car. This is also one of the few places where you get to use a 12mm socket. Why am I using hand tools like a sucker? Let's go for the glory here. Send it with some ugga-dugga. Ta-da! Now, I'm instantly wondering, is this where our oil drain is actually gonna be? Or are we gonna have to clock this differently? Not really sure, TBH, but what I am really sure of is we're just gonna go ahead and loosely bolting this turbo on. So here's where our oil will come in and then it'll drain out. But as you can see, if this drain comes right straight down, it's gonna hit our manifold. We do have some bits, so this might actually be exactly how it does go. Based on the VR6 kit that I had, that probably is how it goes, just like this. But there we go. We got a turbo on. And that's awesome. Hopefully we don't have to take it back off. I'm not taking the manifold off either way. Well, I think we're kind of at the point where we need to get our transmission bolted up. This part right here is called the bevel box. So this is what sends power to the right axle out this hole and to the prop shaft out this guy right here. You do need to really take it off in order to get the transmission portion onto the engine. It was held in with, I think actually just 1 bolt. What that means is I hope we have 3 more of these floating around somewheres. Probably end up having to replace the seal on it. Get off there. Or get a pry bar. Oh wait, I wonder if it never got unbolted from here. Oh yeah, it's just partially screwed in there. So way down in here, that's probably like barely threaded on. That guy is the guy. There we go. There we go. Ooh, off. We'll put you over here, doing the thing I don't want to do. Clean this. Gross. All right, we got our transmission all fresh to death up here. I gotta say, I'm glad we did that. But now I think our next plan is to get trans bolted to engine. Let's put that there. Pump up the jam here. That's at least 14 times too high. So the only 2 bolts I know for sure are here and correct are these 2. Luckily, the parts catalog actually does a good job of listing these out. Oh, you know what? I'm about to do something real dumb. Need to put our release bearing in, well, our new one in anyway. Probably would have been all right, but since we have a new one, oh, listen though. Let's see what the other one sounds like. Oh yeah, that's more better. Put a little lube on our input shaft. We'll get our new release bearing.
With our new slave cylinder properly installed, it's time to bolt the transmission to the engine. For this part, we can just use a couple of bolts to hold them together. I'm also going to stage the powertrain on the cart so that it slides right into the engine bay. And now that that's ready, we get to dig through our bolt collection and try and find all of our engine and transmission mount bolts.
Now, I'm gonna do something that's I may end up regretting, you know, just like this whole entire project. But I'm gonna go ahead and put the intake manifold on next. One, I'm trying to get a mindset of where all these crazy amount of vacuum lines go on this car. The other reason is I'm at the point where I got a lot of parts and I wanna just start getting things picked up and put up. I mean, it's pretty obvious where the intake manifold goes, but it's a pretty big piece and I can start to look at all the stuff that goes underneath and where it goes and how I need to orient that. That bolt hole doesn't feel good. I think we're gonna run a thread chaser down there and try and fix that. Ooh, it feels yucky. Look at all that yuck coming out of there. There we go. Now it won't run all the way in because I don't have the manifold on. Oh yeah, there we go. That'll do it. I never like having to do that stuff, but boy, oh boy, I'm always happy with myself for doing it. All right, so we're kind of at the point now where I think the next best thing is to go ahead and get our engine bolted up in the engine compartment. Now, when installing the engine mount bracket, I noticed something on the engine side mount. The bolt hole for the front bolt looks really, really sad. I ran a thread chaser down in it and cleaned it up as best I could. If it torques down, probably gonna send it. If it doesn't torque down, we'll deal with that when it's time to deal with that. Now, before I get the engine all in the compartment, I need to take the front end off. I need to pull some of this bird's nest of wiring out, and I'm probably gonna spend a few minutes cleaning up inside the engine compartment. I think I'm gonna start by just putting the trans mount in. It's gonna be a little bit of a challenge to kind of woggle this all together. Also, these are new bolts that I picked up to mount the transmission mount to the body of the car. There's also a 13mm bolt at the backside that you have to access through a hole right back here in the cover. If you've ever had to replace Volkswagen, Audi hardware, you know it ain't cheap. If I didn't mention it, these are 034 engine mounts. They're pretty firm, which should hold our extreme horsepower. We're gonna be in just the slow and steady wins the race category here. Ooh, is that enough? Did that, the clearance will undo our shifty boys. I need like 5 sets of eyeballs here. This is gonna allow us just to kind of get it dialed in. Come up. The clocking of this is not right as I expected. That's all right though, we'll get it. Oh, this is big. Monumentous. That, my friends, is one bolted up engine. Ha ba that. Well, now that our engine is in, it is time to deal with this madness. Coolant lines, we have vacuum lines. The beauty of it is most of this stuff only goes one place and it sort of kind of has a memory. All the coil plugs, they're all broken. So because I know I'm gonna have to like route and reroute a lot of this, I'm just laying it in place. Here's our knock sensor. I was looking for that. I know that goes there. Well, our fuse panel's not melted. That's kind of a surprise, but also fun. Looks a whole bunch more like an engine with all this stuff in the bay.
With our turbo upgrade will also come a fuel injector upgrade. Here in the rail, we have our original fuel injectors, and this is the upgraded fuel injector from our kit. As you can see, these are quite a bit longer than the original injectors. On the one hand, it's great because they're plug and play, so we don't have to modify the harness. On the other side, it looks like we're probably going to have to create some kind of spacer for where the fuel rail bolts to the intake manifold. After taking some measurements, I found that these roughly 11mm spacers are going to work just fine. In addition to the spacer, we're gonna need some longer bolts that luckily I had. So now I can install the spacer and the longer bolts with the fuel injectors in the factory rail. I also sent the fuel injector data as well as all of our other mods over to Unitronic. Then I sent them our ECM so that they could tune this TT. If we did all these mods and didn't tune the ECM, the car for sure wouldn't run right.
Before I get the alternator installed, something that when we were going through parts I noticed is that this clutch is actually bad. So what should normally happen is this pulley or clutch should lock one way and free spin the other way. So if you hold it and shake it back and forth, it'll spin the alternator one way and then let it just chill the other way. This one is stuck, locked, seized up, whatever you want to call it. So we have our pulley kit. We don't need to put a whole alternator on. We're just going to replace the pulley. You're holding this, turning the spline piece. There we go. So there we go. You can see it's all scrunchy in there anyway. Give it a twist, make sure it doesn't make a bunch of racket. Now we're gonna just do the opposite. Click, click. I don't know if you could see really what was happening before, but basically no matter which way I turned the pulley, forward based on the arrow or backwards, it was locked to the alternator. Now you should be able to see it. So lock this way, but the pulley turns independent from the alternator. One other thing we need to address is these sleeves right here. You can thread the bolt in, give the bolt a tap with a hammer. That's gonna open this up so you can slide it on the bracket. I have broken ears on alternators before doing it that way. What I like to do is take a socket and a bolt of the same thread pitch. I'm gonna snug this in. So now if we tighten this, you can see it pulls that sleeve in, then you don't ever have to worry about damaging the ear or anything like that. Something that needs to be addressed before we get too much further is this nonsense right here. This is, in fact, one of the most broken connectors on Volkswagens and Audis, period. Initially, all I was gonna do is swap out this connector for a brand new connector and leave all the pins and everything. However, this suffers from a super common 1.8T problem, which is breaking sheathing, especially on the ground wires. These would get so bad that all the wires would be completely busted apart, and they get moisture in them, and shockingly enough, the wiring, the whole harness gets sad. For a while, VW had an overlay, but that overlay is now obsolete. What we're gonna do though is we're gonna cut some of this tape back and we're gonna inspect it. So we got some breaking in the sheathing here. We got just crumbling. This is one of our new connectors, and what I'm actually gonna start off with is some of these pre-crimped VW wires that I have had for probably forever. I'm going to put new seals on here. This is a for sure forget if I don't do it now. We have our seal, we just take this, we have our purple secondary lock out. Listen to this, this sounds so good, ready? So now we have this one little pigtail that we'll start with. I'm gonna do that for all 4 of them. And then we have another component we have to be mindful of, and that's our eyelet, which is gonna go right there. We are going to cut, we are going to strip. Let's put one of these big bad splicey guys on here. Then we are going to crimp away. Now we can go ahead and heat shrink that bad boy. The rest of it is gonna be doing this exact same thing. You may also be wondering, like, why are you using all yellow wires? How are you gonna diagnose it? Honestly, if we end up with a wiring problem in this harness, it's my fault, so this is my self-punishment for doing this way. The other thing, and I don't know that I mentioned this yet here, I found that using some clothespins to kind of hold the wire into place worked super awesome. Once we got all the pins pushed into the connector, we need to get these secondary locks in, which is the purple slide that slips in. Now I can tape my harness back up and it'll look all fresh. Now that our coil harness is finished, we are going to install some new spark plugs. These came on the recommendation from John at Unitronic. These are NGK BK7REIX spark plugs that I got from our man, Paulie D. I'm gonna pair these up with a set of new ignition coils too, because let's be honest, ignition coils are kind of maintenance anyway. As you can see, our fitment back here at the firewall is really tight, and we're gonna have an issue with our heater core lines. So weirdly enough, CTS lists buying this part number N for the heater core. So we're gonna swap these out. And I can tell you, out of all the things that I don't wanna do to this car, a heater core, pretty high up on the list. So let's cross our fingers and see what happens. We're gonna go a bit heavy on the silicone spray here. I don't want anybody having sadness. Oh, that came off. That came off real nice. Silicone that baby up. Like, there we go. We may need to shift these hoses around a little bit once we kind of get all our boost piping in, but that's definitely a better fit. I'm not sure the intake hose is gonna be able to go on here, so I'm gonna leave this like this for now. We got a ton of other stuff to do. I'm not gonna let this slow me down right here, but this is probably gonna have to be addressed.
Now it's time for the thing that I may have spent the absolute most amount of time on. All these vacuum lines and PCV hoses, something all 1.8 turbos are known for, is a complete cluster jam of PCV and vacuum hoses. And of course, it's a great mix of specialty formed stuff and plastic that both get hot and saturated in oil. I did replace the PCV hoses with silicone ones from 034. I also cleaned up and deleted everything that I could underneath the intake manifold and under the bracket that lives just in front of it. This here's what the factory PCV looks like. It's all old and crusty and nasty. And at 135 something thousand miles, I'm guessing this is not the original one from the car. This is also a perfect time to go ahead and install our throttle body with a new gasket. Just like I said with the PCV and vacuum hoses, the 1.8 turbo is known for super brittle plastic in the cooling system. Pretty much all the coolant junctions in this car are plastic. It's got a plastic impeller on the water pump, plastic, 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 plastic. For all those junctions that I could find, I did upgrade to metal ones like the coolant flange, as well as this union here.
Okay, we're looking real good. There is, however, a part that I almost forgot. And that would be our jingle maker. Some might call it a strut tower brace. I would hate to get everything queued up and set and then go, oh no, we forgot to account for this. This takes up a pretty good amount of room, so I ordered a fleet of nuts. Before I forget, we were actually missing this little solenoid, so I had the power steering pump plugged. Thankfully, our man Paulie D came through strong with helping me find this guy. Does this need crush washers? We may have a dilly of a pickle here, my friends. To the repair manual. So the way this works is, this is called a banjo bolt, and you can see it's got a hole in it, whoop, whoop. And it's also got a hole right here. This threads in, and then fluid travels through the bolt into this pipe. And I was correct, it does in fact need some crush washers. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put that there, and we're gonna have to come back to that because I got some coming, but we're not gonna let that slow us down. I'm gonna put the new oil feed line in next. I'm not gonna tighten it till I get like the proper routing and everything done. Okay, so after a bunch of trial and different routings, I don't love the way that I'm going with this, which is just gonna kind of be like this. So our pressure side will come out here, our intake will be here. If I were making my own line, I would come around just like the factory one did. I'd come underneath, like along the backside of the head, and then up and in. We got a long way to go before this engine's running, so I'll have a lot of time to look at it and decide that I hate it and then figure something else out too. Next, we gotta put our drain line in. And this is probably gonna be much trickier than it was before. So this will be the oil that drains out of the turbocharger. Man, I hate the way that goes. So this is one of the fun parts about these kind of things. I actually can't get the oil return line down at the bottom of the turbo on because it's hitting one of the screws for the turbocharger. Now, normally you could just clock the turbo a little bit, but I'm already hitting right back here on the firewall. So I think I'm gonna have to take the cold side off, clock it so this is facing up more, so it's gonna end up being like here, and then try and get that return line on. If I remember right, I had a similar issue with the same company on my Mark III, that the oil return line was just like a complete afterthought. Like they had forgotten they needed to put one on, and then it's like, oh, we gotta put one on. So I ended up just taking the dog bone out, which now I'm worried is gonna present us with a whole new set of problems. We're not locking anything down right now, so we'll worry about that. The amount of times I've said we'll worry about that later. Now I can at least fit the return line on.
I initially built the oil return line that came with our kit and then did some test fitting while the engine was on the stand, and it fit great. However, once it's in the car and everything's installed, the fitment wasn't so great. Here's a little bit better look at how the return line has to be routed. Up at the turbocharger side, it's really close to where the exhaust manifold is. Truthfully, there's not a ton that we can do about that other than maybe put some heat shielding or some kind of sleeve over it. The thing that has me more concerned is how the line has to be routed. You're making a choice of either running it completely down the downpipe right next to where the prop shaft is and risking it overheating or rubbing on a rotating component. So what I try to do is route it on the backside right up against where the block is. This kind of mimics the way the factory oil return line goes, and I think that's going to be a better route. The problem with that is our line that came with the kit is just too short. So rather than having a terrible routing of our oil return line, I'm gonna order some more line and we'll just make a new one so that I can route it in a better and safer manner.
Okay, for contrast, this is the factory return line, and this goes into the pan, and then this goes up into the turbo. So that's how the factory oil return line goes. That's sort of the style that I mimicked, because that other way, I don't love what I had to do, but boy, I hated running it right between the downpipe and the prop shaft. That is very poor. I seem to remember having oil return line issues on my Mark III CTS kit. I have more to say, but I won't. Let's keep going. Okay, next up, we're gonna do a fun little experiment and try and get some oil delivered throughout our system. We are going to try, this might not work by the way, pumping some oil up through where the oil filter would fill oil and see how it goes. I have a little rubber coupler here. This is where I like the VRs because they have the that like old distributor gear that you could just spin with a drill, build up oil pressure through the whole car. What I'm actually waiting for is oil to start dripping down the bottom, because ideally it's gonna come up through the oil turbo feed line, down and out the turbo. Oh, we're getting a little drippage out of the thing. And just like that, not even a minute after I stopped rolling the camera, I got oil dripping down the backside here. So that means we have, at minimum, oil up through the turbo line, feed into the turbocharger, and coming back down through. Hopefully we're getting oil up in like the cams and that too. Either way, we got something. Let's check topside.
I'm also gonna pre-fill our engine oil filter and install it. This may seem like a little bit much given what we just did, but I wanna take all the precautions to prevent oil starvation on our freshly rebuilt engine. Since we're here, let's get the fan control module plugged in and hope that it isn't bad, which is a common failure. We also have some coolant hoses that we need to address. This turbocharger that came with the kit does not use coolant for cooling. It's oil only. So we have to install these banjo bolts to basically take the place of this factory hose. It's going to bolt to the back of the block and then into this T-piece right here. I think in a perfect world, I would prefer coolant to cool our turbocharger in addition to engine oil, but this seems to be a pretty common setup. So a couple of banjo fittings and a new line, and we're good to go.
Let's get some pulleys on. We're gonna put our crank pulley on. We can even screw around and put our serpentine belt on. And our crush washers came, so let's get this straightened out. This has kind of been one of the more challenging things about this whole job. Since I didn't take it apart, a lot of it is like, I'm not sure if it's supposed to be this way or that way. A lot of this stuff suffers from the like old internet problems where someone did the thing like 15 years ago, but then it's on a forum, so all the pictures are dead. It's all right. We're getting it done. If you're doing something like this, you can look at this video and go, oh, that's how Charles put it. We can put our little solenoid on. This has a crush washer on it already, so we don't need to worry about anything extra there. Something I am gonna do real quick, two things. One, I'm gonna take this is the oil pressure sensor connector. It's completely broken, so we're gonna get a new one of those coming. I'm also gonna take the oil pressure switch out and I'm gonna install the oil pressure gauge. The reason I'm doing that now is eventually I'm gonna have to put this front end back on, and it's gonna make it a nightmare trying to get all this stuff hooked in here when I have the front end onto the car. You can see why, like, no chance this would be happening with the front end of the car on. Now we have our gauge, so when we're ready to start it, we can monitor oil pressure, and that'll give me an opportunity to find another one of these connectors. Our next step is actually a pretty big one. I need to get everything ready in preparation to put the core support and the front bumper on. I'm also gonna drop our battery in. There's a ton of piping that I have, some for this kit, some from other stuff, so we should have everything to make this go nice and smooth, but now that I said that, you better believe that absolutely will not happen. That doesn't come close to fitting. After struggling with some boost pipe action and being thoroughly disappointed that there was no type of installation guide whatsoever, I think I figured it out. I couldn't find an installation guide for the 180. I did find one for the 225 though, and it actually showed the charge cooler, instead of being mounted like this, it was mounted with this piece up above. I like that a little better, I guess. That's cool. Let's circle back and see what our boost piping can look like now.
For the first startup, I'm only gonna loosely install the boost piping. After I've made sure the car runs, I'll come back and properly install all the piping and make sure that we don't have any fitment issues. Bolting up the downpipe, turbocharger, and exhaust manifold were a little bit tricky. Not only is space back here really tight, but I wanted to avoid any unnecessary stress on each of these components. That means we tighten everything down a little bit at a time until it's all tight. And since we're right here, let's go ahead and get that Liqui Moly turbocharger additive put in. Always a good idea when you replace a turbocharger to drop some of this in to be sure the first time the turbocharger spools up, it's properly lubricated. Our new oil return hose kit has arrived, so we're going to be replacing the one that came with the kit with a longer hose that also has a 90-degree fitting at the oil pan instead of a straight one.
We're gonna have to make a cut of this hose, but the first thing I'm gonna do, put these end pieces on, do one end, and then we'll make our cut and then do the other end. I really like PTFE for this application, so this will be our oil pan side. Next, we need to separate the braiding from the insert. You can see that white insert. We gotta kind of flare this out a little bit. Then we put our olive, what that piece is called, make sure it's seated all the way. Then you get this dowel piece in here that kind of re-expands the inner sleeve. We take our end, give it a little coat of oil, go like this, snug it up. That is the end of that. Super easy. I really like using PTFE for this, if for no other reason. And making the lines are really simple. We need to make a cut. Now I've taped where I want to make the cut. Let's get this clamped in the vise so we can put the end on.
Doing this fitting is exactly the same as the other one, and now we have a completed line that we can actually install and route instead of just cramming it in the hole and hoping for the best.
All this does is just goes over this hose just like that, and we'll probably do it to right about there, and then we'll reinstall this thing. Did I get it threaded? I think I did. Excellent. We are about to have a monumental moment. It's time to put oil in this thing. Now, I'm not ready to start, but I want to go ahead and get engine oil in it because I don't want to end up forgetting. I am also going to hook the battery up. Still have more parts on the way, so we're not ready to start yet, but it's a big moment. The radio works. I want to see how much fuel is in it though, because that may dictate what we do next. It's time to get some old nasty gross fuel out of this thing. Also, look at, I was able to pop the fuel door for the first time in 1,000 years. Look, a stone from that grinder. Why is that in there? I don't know. Here's the grill for the car. Sweet. My Little Pony action, check that out. Talk about someplace uncomfortable. This isn't even the back of a Volkswagen. This car is super nice, man. I like this thing. So our fuel pump lives behind here. There's actually another cover right here too, but that is not the up to the front pump. My plan is to power the pump, hook up another line right here and pump it dry. And then we'll put some fresh fuel in it. I'm gonna guess this is the original fuel filter from this car. Funny enough, I have a fuel filter for this car because it's the same as the R32 fuel filter. I was questioning myself a little bit on whether we really needed to do draining all the fuel or not, but yo, I think it's pretty clear. This speaks for itself. So I'm gonna get the rest of this out of here and then throw that new fuel filter in. Luckily, we only have about 1/8 of a tank, probably a little less in the TT, so we don't have too much to deal with, but man, oh man. Yuck. So we got our jug here. This is a line that I had that clips right into the factory fuel line fitting. Got my power probe, and we're just gonna power the pump. I'm also gonna be real careful not to run this pump dry and ruin what should hopefully be, anyway, a good pump. Not a ton of fuel out, maybe a 1.5 gallons, 2 gallons or so. Let's get our new fuel filter installed, and we can move on to whatever the heck the next thing is, because honestly, I don't even really know at this point. It's time to flush/bleed our brake system. This has been open for a really long time, so one, no doubt in my mind, the fluid is absolute trash. 2, we need to bleed our slave cylinder that we just put in. 3, it's been open, so the fluid's full of moisture. So I'm gonna flush and bleed all 4 corners of the brake system. I'm gonna do the clutch. Did we get any fluid coming out yet? No. All right, so I've spent the last hour trying to bleed the clutch, and unfortunately, I'm getting no fluid at the bleeder block right at the release bearing slave cylinder unit, which is all one part on this car. I swapped out the bleeder block to see if maybe that was the problem for one from USB Motorsports. Still no good. Likely from just sitting, probably with the clutch pedal slammed to the floor, we have a bad master cylinder. There's a seal or something that's stopped up or some junk in there. We are going to be replacing the master cylinder, which is this guy right here. I'm also gonna put a clutch line on, mostly because I have one. First thing we're gonna do is take the seat out because I need to get all up in that area. Now I can lay down in that hole there and replace the master cylinder. Here we go. I'm going in. I'm also hand tooling this one because this old plastic gets pretty brittle. This is inappropriately posing Charles here. Oh, geez. Okay, I guess that whole thing comes down. 10 out of 10, this would be easier if I opened the door all the way up. So, check this out. That came apart. We might be having to recall our friends at Lifetime Audi and see if they got one. Ah! That is what happens when you put your butt on a ratchet. All right, I got it. That wasn't too bad. The worst part about this guy, well, one is laying down under there. These clips are just not my favorite. Here's our new one. Let's go ahead and install it. Hey, oh, that went on real. That went on suspiciously easy. So my spring came undid from the pedal, and it's kind of a pain in the butt to get back up in there. So what I did was I zip tied it. Hopefully that'll make it easier to install. Now we gotta go under the hood and do that side. I'm just gonna leave all this seat and everything out for now till we get it to where I can open the door all the way and make my life easier. I said we were going under the hood next, but I changed my mind. I'm gonna try and take this line off. Hey, I think I got it. Hey, I'm not sure yet. Going back together is gonna be super easy. There we go. This little piece right here is the other part where I was like, maybe that's a problem. Here's our new stainless. We're gonna bring the car down so I could go up top and connect it to the master cylinder we just installed. Should be able to snap this in pretty easy. There we go. We got our brake flushy bleedy guy hooked up. You really want 2 bar pressure on this, but I'm a little uneasy pumping mine up that high. Ooh, we got fluid. Hey, all right. That is infinitely better than it was before. See, if you just put enough parts on, no matter what the problem is, it'll get fixed. Also, real quick, I wanna show you what's happening like in time of while I'm working on this car. Look what came back from the body shop. Dun, 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 black R32, look at that beauty. Once the TT's done, we can start working on that, which I'm mega hyped about, but we gotta get this car done first. Okay, I got the clutch bled, the brakes are bled, everything feels as good as it can when you're trying to push the clutch in with no seat in the car. We may have to go back and re-bleed the brakes, but I'm not gonna worry about that right now. Our next step is to pull all our boost piping and hosing back out because these things get pretty nasty. So I'm gonna pull everything back apart, get everything cleaned on this reassembly. I'm going back together as if this were final assembly. So clamps, connectors, probably gonna put coolant and power steering fluid in it. I'm not quite sure yet, but okay, so we have a bit of an issue back here at the back. I still can't get this intake hose on. So it's like mashed in to where it's really just not functional. I ordered a fitting that I think will work. In the meantime, we're gonna Home Depot Motorsports it and bypass the heater core. So I'm just gonna drop these 2 in. I'm only filling it with water initially anyway. We'll flush the cooling system out later. Probably use the exact same part too. It's good enough that our cooling system is sealed. We can just kind of tuck this back there. When our new fitting comes, we'll redo this. Now we don't have all that crap in the way to get our intake pipe on. One of the important parts of these boost pipings is we gotta put our pressure sensor in. This is where it goes. We'll go ahead and bolt this up, plug it in, and then I'll show you guys how I have all the boost pipes routed. To be honest, I don't love it. We're kind of making the best of it right this minute, and in the future, we can always change it. All right, so our boost piping is all sorted. I also have the N75, which is the wastegate control solenoid hooked up. Our next step is our diverter valve, which is this piece right here. As you accelerate, boost is built throughout the system. Pressure, right? Pressure in all these hoses through the charge cooler. Well, when you let off the accelerator, all that pressure is still in there. And so to prevent that pressure from backfeeding back into the turbo, you have this little guy right here, diverter valve, cutoff valve, turbo recirculation valve, very similar function to a blow-off valve. Now the recirc valve is going to take that pressure, it's going to vent it back into our intake. If it were a blow-off valve, it would just vent it out to atmosphere. What we're gonna do is we're gonna just take this hose, we're gonna just put this like this. This is most certainly not our final setup here. I'm just doing this to kind of get it installed so we don't have a big old hole. All right, couple more things to do before we can fire this thing up. I have this little plug that I need to put up here in the exhaust. At some point we might end up putting a wideband O2 in here or something like that. Now we won't have a giant exhaust leak right here. Our last boost piping bit is this pipe right here, which goes from out of the turbo into our first piping. So I, as you can see, have very little space because of our strut tower brace. So I think for right now, I'm just gonna take this bar off. Once we get the car a little more sorted, I'll put it back on and make the cut to this. Before our final install of this pipe, we need to put this little guy into this pipe. Now there's a million different ways to install this, but this is just how we're gonna do this one because it's easy. And this is a small pressure tap that typically goes as close to the turbo or on the turbo as possible, but we're gonna put one in this silicone hose. So I probably want this to exist on the back side. This will be the side you see when you open the hood. And as we tighten down the nut for it, it should seal that up nice and fresh. I use this one kind of thing on my Mark III too, and it works really, really well. We got our pipe. I'm gonna put this vac line on it because it's gonna be just easier to do it here. I'm not 100% sure this is how even our like boost control is gonna remain. We may end up changing some of this up at some point. Okay, I have a few more things left to do. We still have to fill the system with coolant. In this case, I'm only gonna put water in it because we still have our heater core bypass we need to address. This is also a good opportunity to inspect for coolant leaks without wasting a bunch of coolant. I need to fill it with power steering fluid. We need to get the battery battery tray and battery in. I also got some fresh fuel that we need to put in it still. I'll do one final full check and just look for stuff like, as I'm talking, I'm remembering, hey, you never hooked up your fuel lines, Chuck. After that, I'm a little nervous, but it's time. It'll be time. It'll be time to fire it up. As far as I can tell, I got everything taken care of. I got the drip tray underneath for when and if something explodes. After I crank it, I'm gonna hook the fuel pump back up and we're gonna fire it up. First time this car has run in no less than 5 years. Full engine rebuild. So yeah, I'm a little nervous, but not too bad. What's the worst that could happen? It blows up, then we get to do it all over again. Here we go. So we're getting some oil pressure now. I think it's time to hook the fuel pump up. Let's make sure nothing's super puking out of the bottom. But okay, here we go. Nothing to do but to do. This is it. Here we go. Hey! Okay. It sounds great. Wow. All right. Yes. Okay. Amazing. All right, so here's the plan. I'm gonna clear up this stuff. I'm gonna actually pull the car outside so I can run it, bring the RPM up, and I don't just asphyxiate the whole shop. Okay, here we go. First time driving. Oh, I'm sitting on the ground. Hey! Look at me go! Look at me go! And just like that, 2 months have passed and we're getting the TT finally back in the shop. The great thing is the car runs. We'll call that a victory. However, I have 8 million little things that I need to button up and redo and reroute and all that good stuff, all in preparation to head to the dyno and see how much horsepower this car is gonna make. So as of right now, I have the core support sort of loosely installed. Before I go any further, it is time for some air conditioning work, which I'm mega excited about because I just got this machine for essentially nothing in the world of shop equipment. I paid $1,500 for it. Yeah, it's used, but who cares? This is the deal of a century for this thing. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hook the AC machine up. We're gonna pull it into a vacuum. It's gonna burn off any excess moisture that might be left in the system. I did put a new receiver dryer on there because the system had been open for like 6 years. In addition to that, pulling into a vacuum is going to do kind of a first level of leak check. We'll do a vacuum leak test, then we'll put a little bit of refrigerant in it, make sure we don't have any leaks. The reason I'm doing that now is if I wait till I get everything put back together and have a problem, I'm gonna just have to pull everything back apart, and that is a stupid way to do it. I guess if we were doing it the least stupid way, we would have quit years ago. Now I'm going to install our new-ish headlights. Unfortunately, from the years of sitting, it looks like they've gotten scratched up a little bit, but that's not the end of the world. There. Now we have a pretty big part here. Let's get the bumper and the upgraded cooler on. So I think I'm gonna just drop that. Next up, I gotta finish fitting all these boost pipes. To say it is a snug fit would probably be an understatement. Some of these clamps I may have to re-clock to fit a little bit better, but all this stuff should be covered with the bumper cover anyway. Same thing for the passenger side. There's also a little bit of fitment issue right here with the spot where you thread in the tow hook. I also went ahead and pulled the fender liners. It's gonna make installing our bumper cover a little easier, and also these like to build up mud and dirt behind the fender liners, just like VWs like to do. And this is a good place to let your car rust if you don't clean it out. Okay, this is a huge moment. It's time to get our bumper cover installed. Now I've already put on the headlight washer assemblies, these guys here and here, and put the hose on it. Our bumper cover is cracked a little bit. It'll be okay, I think. So we're gonna take this guy. So we're just gonna find that it doesn't really wanna go on. So I don't know if you can see right in here, our headlight washer's hitting our boost piping. We might end up having to trim this out a little bit. So I'm going to pop these headlight washers off and see how the bumper cover fits. If you look right here, you can see it's pushing up against this boost hose pretty hard. I'm gonna put the grill on, see how far the grill sticks out, and then make a little trim. So I'm gonna test fit that, and then if it fits, I'll come back and like clean up those ratty Dremel marks that I left. So that mark right there is where the grill stopped. So we have plenty of space where we can trim out. So as we get wrapped up on the car, I have a bunch of things still to account for, like this dangly power steering line. This line normally bolts to this pipe, which is a boost pipe. We don't need it because we have installed our premium stage 5 charge cooler. It also doesn't fit because of this piping. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make 2 small brackets. It's probably gonna look like trash if I had to guess, but at least we won't have to worry about this dangling down. I also found that when I was trying to put on this passenger side belt skirt, which kind of goes up here, sort of like that, it's missing the back end. This thing is useless because we also don't have a belly pan, which would bolt here. So to the trash that goes. Also, you may remember from way back in episode 1, I showed you guys this sweet street shield that I was pretty hyped about. Well, it turns out this doesn't even go to this car. I tried to fit it on there and it doesn't even come close to fitting. This is actually for like a B5 S4 bonus, I suppose. And I thank the dear Lord Jesus every day that I don't own a B5 S4. So we'll just find a friend to give this to and pretend it was never here. Something else we have to account for is the horns, because we want this car to pass North Carolina state inspection. The unfortunate part is they actually bolt up exactly where our intercooler is mounted. So what I think I'm gonna do is I just loosened the brackets. So it's a little floppity right now, and I'm gonna bolt this up facing forward, kind of like where that pipe was supposed to go.
While I wrap up 900,000 little things on this car before heading to the dyno, let's talk about what I spent on the car. Initially, I was in for $1,300, including the car and all the performance parts that came with it. Looking back, I probably would have just done better to part it all out and move on to something else, but I didn't, because here we are. The clutch, pressure plate, and flywheel cost me about $1,000. The machine work, including reboring another block, having the original block checked, installing the new valves and the new valve springs and retainers, was about $800. The valve springs and retainers from Integrated Engineering, $550. The exhaust valves from Integrated Engineering, $185. And the coated rod bearings cost me about $100. There were also almost infinite little things that I didn't account for penny by penny, including a bunch of bolts, the broken connectors that we replaced, gaskets for the turbocharger, that new oil return line, a new master cylinder, the clutch line. Some of those things I had, some of them I had to get. So I'm gonna ballpark that at probably around $500 to $700. And yes, bolts are in fact that expensive. Not including labor and the gallons of coffee that it took to finish this project, I'm in it for about $3,500 to $4,000, which all things considered is actually pretty good. You probably wouldn't be able to build this same car in that price unless you scored a score kind of like I did. Now, from the time I bought it till the time I'm gonna sell it, the car market has completely tanked, which means I'm likely going to take an absolute bath when I go to sell this car.
The headroom in this car is terrible. There's a joke about someplace uncomfortable like the back of a Volkswagen, but man, oh man, this might be worse. I have one more thing I need to do before its first official, like, real deal test drive, and that is put some coolant in it. At some point, I'm going to do a coolant flush and an engine oil flush, but I think that's gonna happen after the dyno. I'm hedging a little bit, just in case we blow it up on the dyno. I don't wanna waste our good Liqui-Moly stuff. In the meantime, let's get some coolant in this thing and drive it. This will be like the first real time this car has driven in 6 years. So in addition to taking it on its maiden voyage, I'm also gonna go get some wheel bolts from my storage unit. There we go. There we go, okay. This gets no power. I think we made it slower. The problem is I can't really drive it. So we may just have to wait till tomorrow at the dyno and extrapolate some data there. Okay, so it is finally time. The day is here. We are headed to the dyno. I'm gonna throw out a horsepower guess, completely uneducated, useless guess that I'm about to do, of 192 horsepower to the wheels of Fury. What I'm hopeful for is that the car performs well, or catastrophically explodes. And what I'll tell you, if that happens catastrophically, like indoor parts become outdoor parts, I'm never taking a car to another dyno again, because I'm scared. Like Paul when it's cold. Well, I'm gonna throw some fuel in it and then we're gonna take it right over there. Just right there. That's all we gotta do. here we are in the rain. All right, this is it. Moment of truth. Ian's doing the calibration on the dyno. Then we're probably gonna do 3 pulls and hope for the best. If you haven't already guessed what you think this car is gonna make in the comments, do that now before you see what it actually makes. I'm gonna guess 190, which I feel like is probably a little optimistic. Ready when you are. This is it. My anxiety level is high. Okay, shifting through. It's when it really tacks up is when my anxiety goes up with it. Ooh, so impressive. Oh, okay. We are at 158 horsepower and 132 pound-feet of torque. Seems the main reason is our N75, which is the boost controller for the car, like from the factory, is unhappy. So I'm gonna walk around everything Euro and see if anybody's got a manual boost controller. It seems that we were actually running just off of our engine, very little to no boost, which is actually pretty good for our engine. So in an effort to eliminate some hosing potential issues and the N75, which is the factory boost controller, the boys at Everything Euro actually had this manual boost controller just chilling. So I'm gonna install this, cut some clamps, and see what happens. Okay, I got the manual boost controller installed. It's set about halfway, so we'll have a little bit of adjustment if we need to. Ian's gonna drive it, and he said he'll know right away once he drives it. We'll go from there. That's my the car's gonna blow up dance. I think this is just a drive data log. I don't think it has any boost again. Picked up 4 horsepower. Okay, this is with the boost controller basically turned all the way up, so we're relying on the spring pressure inside the wastegate. We were getting full request for boost, but only like 0.2 bar, which is what, 3 PSI, something like that? Don't check my math. Whoa! I don't know if that was there the whole time. Well, we were popping the dipstick out. That's from this popping out on the other runs. Yeah, because it's all on the windshield.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Charles, what are you doing?
Well, the silver lining is there's plenty of places that will buy a scrap Audi TT. So with that, I'm out. Have an awesome day, and I'll talk to you again next time. Bye. Okay, I can't just leave you hanging on a we're gonna send this thing to scrap note because, well, I'm not gonna do that. So we got the TT back to the shop, and I think I have figured out what's wrong with it, and that is I didn't install the valve seat for the wastegate. So this little ring goes in the wastegate right here, right at the flange where the wastegate bolts up to the manifold. So my next job is I'm gonna take the wastegate off, I'm gonna install this, and then we're gonna drive it and see what happens. I'm not even gonna take it all the way out. I was able to just rotate the wastegate around so we can slip our ring back in, bolt everything up, and then I'm gonna take it on a test drive. And hopefully this is the answer to our problems. After a bit of discomfort while doing the wastegate valve seat, I got it out, I got it back in. It's all buttoned up, we got a boost gauge hooked up. So now it's time to drive it. What if this has so much horsepower that the chassis twists off the line? This is why test driving cars is so important. So you don't drive all the way to the dyno just to realize you ain't got no boost. We probably are still running pretty low boost. I have the N75, which is the factory boost controller, hooked up still. All right, here we go. Yes. So we definitely know we have boost. This actually feels like it's got some power now. Probably around 200 would be my guess. The unfortunate part is I'm not dragging it all the way back to the dyno to test that. All right. I think that's a much better way to end the video than on just a pathetic we're gonna send it to the scrap. I'm pretty excited that we fixed the boost issue. I hate what it was, but that's part of a project like this. I think the final piece of this TT puzzle is I'm gonna pull this instrument cluster out to fix our blacky danced out screen, that's the word. Send it over to Clusters by Litkey, have our man Matt fix that, drop it back in, and then this bad boy is going up for sale. So with that, for real this time, I'm out. Have an awesome day, and I'll talk to you again next time.